Traders Corner is proudly brought to you by IG, the specialists in CFD trading.
Welcome to Traders Corner. As always, I'm joined by Garth McKenzie, founder and editor of Traders Corner. Garth, welcome.
Hi, Julieta.
Garth, let's start off this week with one of your fairly recent trades, and that's a long position on BHP Billiton. How is that working out for you? Because BHP and Anglo certainly have given people quite a few grey hairs over the last few weeks.
Yeah, they have. That's right. They've been weak over the last couple of months, really. But we identified an entry opportunity we felt in Billiton last week, and we entered a trade. So if you have a look at the chart that's on the screen now, this is now a long-term chart of BHP Billiton. It basically goes back the entire length of this bull market that began in 2009. And the trend line that I've put on there is a nicely tight-fitting trend line. It joins a number of the significant low points that we've seen over the last 5 years on the stock. And what is quite evident is that there's fairly strong support down at 280 Rand, and we have seen the stock bouncing off that level. It's reversed up quite nicely. So what we went and did last week for the show was we bought 375 CFDs at 284 Rand. I put a nice loose stop loss in at 270 Rand initially, and my target here is 315 Rand. That's an initial target. Now if we just zoom in a little bit more on the chart of the trading action more recently, now we're looking at about 6 months worth of trading action over here. What I identified last week was that, yes, we had this support in the 280 Rand area, but what also really got me excited about it was this positive divergence that we were seeing on both the stochastic oscillator and the relative strength index. And what that positive divergence very often indicates is an imminent change in trend. And on the basis of that last week, I was happy to do the trade, even though we hadn't seen the trend actually turning yet. And if we have a look what's happened in recent days now, you can see quite clearly that the stock has actually now broken out through that downward trend. So the divergence that I'd identified there was accurate. It's played out exactly how I thought it would. Now, where to from here? Obviously, today the stock is weak a little bit, today being Tuesday. And I suspect what we probably could see here is a little bit of a pullback maybe into this 290 Rand area. There is a gap in the chart there, and whether that gap actually gets filled or not remains to be seen. But I suspect we could see a bit of consolidation in this area now between 290 and 300, and that could quite feasibly set up the right shoulder of an inverted head and shoulders pattern over there, which could then ultimately see the stock breaking to the upside. What's going to be quite critical is to watch this area around 303 Rand, because that's where there's now lateral resistance that the stock will need to contend with. But if I take what I've seen in this chart so far, take that long-term support, take the positive divergence that we've seen, take the break of this recent downtrend, and then also recall that we discussed in the show last week that the end of the year and often leading into around about February of the following year is actually quite a bullish time for the resources stocks. So if I put all that together, I think this trade still looks fairly good, and I'm happy to keep holding it. Okay,
so long of Billiton for the time being, and you're going to stay there. And then what about of the all-share index? Because you entered a trade into an SA40, a micro CFD. You must be quite chuffed with how that's worked out.
I'm very chuffed with it, yeah. It's worked out beautifully for us, and we have banked profits on it this week. Just to fill in the viewers who may not have seen this or not know, what I did here, this is a product that is offered by IG Markets. They're our sponsor of this show, and it's a 2 Rand micro contract. So what it is that every point on the top 40 index is represented by a 2 Rand movement on this product. So it's a really great little product to use if you're a start-out trader and you're wanting to begin trading the market without taking on excessive exposure. This CFD allows you to do that. So what we identified about 2 or 3 weeks back now, what I identified was this inverted head and shoulders pattern, which was evident on our top 40 index. And I also saw a small little triangle pattern, which was more easily identifiable actually on the hourly chart at the time, but there you can see it on the daily chart here as well. I went along and I bought 2 contracts of this micro CFD at 43,080. My stop loss was 42,350, and I was looking for a move up to 45,000. The 45,000 was basically the underside of where we've got all this resistance that was made back in July, August, September. Now, what's happened since then? Well, it's worked out beautifully. We've managed to sell at 45,000 over the last few days, and for that we bank a profit of 7,680 Rand.
Nice.
So all told, it's a very good trade. It has gone a bit beyond our target level, but
such is life. I mean, you know, having looked at it now, were you tempted at any point to run it beyond 45,000 Rand, which, as you say, was the target?
Yes. Look, I was tempted, but what you must remember is that we do also have a top 40 futures position open currently, which is against our option structure. We'll discuss that in a moment. So I felt that we've still got a pretty decent exposure via that top 40 future anyway. I had a fairly structured approach to this trade, and I figured I'd stick with it and bank the profit at our suggested level.
Well, it's enough to keep you in socks and underpants for the short term, Garth.
That's right, yeah.
Right, so let's have a look at that option structure, because as you say, you have got an exposure, but that is using a more traditional product, which I suppose trades in 10 Rand increments, doesn't it, as opposed to 2
That's
Rand.
right. So, yeah, let me explain the option structure quickly, first of all. I know we've discussed this many times on the show, but I'll quickly run it through it for the viewers that might not have seen it. It's a put spread option structure. I bought 2 put options on the top 40 future, and I sold 4 far out the money put options on top 40 future. The resultant payoff is what you see here. So above 45,000 on the top 40 future costs me absolutely zero. It makes money below that level. It makes its maximum profit at 43,350, and then that profit will start to dwindle away if the market should fall below that. Now, what I did some time back was I used this structure as a hedging instrument so that I could go along and I could actually buy 1 contract on the top 40 future. And that payoff of the one top 40 future is illustrated by the dotted line over there. So you can see I was in from 45,200. Basically, above 45,200, that options position makes money. Below 45,200, it loses money, but the loss gets offset by the protection from the option structure. Now, this thing's caused me a lot of grey hairs during the last couple of months, but where do we sit with it right now? Well, currently, the top 40 futures are around about 45,500. So that means that we're making a very small mark-to-market profit on that futures position of 3,000 Rand. If the market continues to rise, we'll continue to make money on it. However, if the market were to fall, well, then there's also a chance that we start getting back into the area where the option structure makes some money for us. So we've kind of got both sides of the equation protected here.
The thing is, the worst, having lived through a rather severe correction where I would have said then the worst thing there is to go below 41,700, and this is where we did briefly venture, and which caused you all those grey hairs. But I suppose at this point, the worst place to be would be in that dead zone, wouldn't it?
Which is more or less, we're quite close to it,
exactly.
About 45,000, 45,200. If the market settles in that zone at the futures
then you don't make any money at all.
We'll make nothing on this, and all the grey hairs will have been for naught. So that would be disappointing. So what we want right now is we want some movement one way or the other. Either the market must go higher or lower from here, and this structure will start to look good for us.
But not dramatically so.
No, not dramatically.
Yeah, not as
lower.
dramatically as it did a couple of weeks ago.
No.
Okay, so a slight profit there, which is probably a smaller profit than, in fact, you were making last week. Because ironically enough, you were in a sort of a better mark-to-market position.
We were. It's been interesting. I've learned a lot, and I hope the viewers have learned a lot about this structure, because it's caused us many interesting times between that big correction and now where we sit, where it's looking rather dull.
Yeah, I mean, that would be the ultimate irony, is that you end up where it does absolutely nothing at all. Well, such is life. Garth, and then there's one stock that you want to look at this week. You haven't taken a trade in it or a position in it, but it's MTN. Why has this one caught your eye?
Yes, I'm going to keep an eye on this for this week, and remembering that I'm away next week, so that's why I'm a bit loath to enter a new trade right now. But the chart of MTN does interest me, and if you have a look at it, we're going back about a year and a half here. And what you can see, there's quite clearly a well-defined upward trend on the stock over there. There's also this lateral area of support that comes in at around about 220 Rand. So there's a lot of support in this zone between 220 and 225. And I think if we see some stability there and possibly a reversal up from there, it might very well warrant looking at the stock from a long trade perspective. Just to let the viewers know why the price has come under a bit of pressure in the last few days is because there's some concern around the Nigerian currency, the Naira. And that country derives a lot of its revenues from oil exports. And with the oil price having had such a dramatic drop over recent months, there's now concern that their revenues from oil exports are going to drop, and if the currency will devalue, and that if MTN has a fairly significant business in Nigeria, if the naira was to devalue sufficiently, it could end up impacting MTN's earnings negatively. That's why the shares come under a bit of pressure. Whether that is warranted or not remains to be seen. I think we'll largely be guided by the charts here.
It is interesting that MTN, sort of one of the biggest risks, is not necessarily politics, it's currency risk at the moment. And, it earns in rands, it earns in, of course, its situation in Iran has been sort of fascinating for us in Nigeria, which is its biggest OPCO cluster, as they call it, is in that area of the country, of the continent. Garth, we've got a bit of time before we get to have a look at the end of the to what the portfolio looks like at the moment. Just your sense of the markets, the volatility has dropped quite a lot, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Do you feel that we might be a slow grind higher if there is going to be a rally, the traditional Christmas rally that we've experienced over the last few years? Do you think it's going to be a slow one rather than kind of a dramatic ups and downs kind of rally as we would have seen a couple of weeks ago?
I think if we're going to see a Santa Claus rally, then what would be the best case scenario for our market now would actually be to consolidate at current levels and maybe even pull back 1,000 points or so, to then set it up for a year-end rally. I think what we must also remember is that the Santa Claus rally that everybody thinks about, a lot of people think that the Santa Claus rally must start, when the Christmas decorations go into the shops.
Well, they have.
In about October sometime. And that's not traditionally how the Santa Claus rally works. In fact, your Santa Claus rally often only starts in December, just before Christmas. So let's see, there's still plenty of time. But as I say, I think the best case scenario for our market now would be if we did consolidate from current levels, and that would then reset things and probably set us up with a nice foundation to potentially have a push into year end. But we've had a strong run recently, particularly on the US market. So I think that the likelihood of some consolidation around these levels now is quite a real possibility.
And if you had to look at any sectors in particular, are there any that you would favour than others?
Well, on a relative basis, your industrial sector still actually is showing us the outperformer on our market. So I suppose that's the safest bet. But also remember what I spoke about when we looked at the BHP Bulletin trade. Seasonally, you do actually often see a fairly strong push for the resources stocks in the period between sort of November leading out to February each year. That's what we've seen in each of the last 5 years. And it does look as if there's a potential for that sort of scenario to play out again this year. And that's part of the reason why I'm in that BHP Bulletin trade.
Okay. Well, what does the portfolio then look like at the moment? All
right, it's looking good. So we've actually had quite a good week. We've got 360,000 Rand in our account, so that's up 44% for the year to date. We've got profit sitting with our option structure there. We made money on Bidvest, which we closed last week. There's the profit that we made on the top 40, the micro contract. And then our BHP Bulletin is running a mark-to-market profit of 6,100 Rand. Okay. So all in all, looking quite good.
44%. Against what the All-Share Index has done this year, looks even better.
The All-Share Index, I don't know, but I think it's probably between 5 and 10% up for the year.
Okay. Garth, and then just to finish off with, your next course.
Yeah, my final course for this year is going to be this week, Saturday, in Johannesburg. It's a high probability trading course on the 15th of November. Anyone that's interested in attending, please email me, garth@traderscorner.co.za, and I'll send you the information.
Great. Garth, we'll leave it there. Thanks, as always, for joining us on the show.
Thanks.
That's Garth McKenzie, founder and editor of Traders Corner.
Traders Corner is proudly brought to you by IG, the specialists in CFD trading.